I'm here as a representative of two senior authors that are not able to be present. I think one of them is on her way to, Sarah's on her way to Australia now, and my daughter Sarah is in Ecuador. So speaking on behalf of both of them, giving a couple of talks back to back, I'll do my best to be quick with them. Both of them tell pretty cool stories. This first story represents a project, a complete brainchild of Sarah Barris, who became interested in the question about budding and females' relationship to budding. So she did something really novel that I'm thrilled about for reasons that I'll describe. I'm just going to give you a quick intro, quick methods, quick results, and a couple of bullets about why I think this is a sort of a revolutionary study that Sarah initiated just this past year. As everybody knows here, scrub jays live in these very vigorously defended territories year-round. And this is just an example of a territory map of the kind that we make every year in this big study population at Archbold. The blue rectangle is the building area that we're in right now, and west of us are all these territories we follow right now, 80 or so scrub jay families at Archbold. Inside each of these families, you have the wonderful permanently mated pair bond and any surviving offspring from the years previous who haven't dispersed themselves. They help raise next year's young, pure family values bird. Why this is not yet the Florida state bird, I don't know. Cooperative breeders, they're in these family groups. Key to the story is that these young birds delay at least 1 year, sometimes 2 or 3 years, and stay inside the territory. Then, of course, once they're 1 year old, they enter this, what I refer to as the queue. They're trying to work their way in to become a breeder somewhere near home or beyond. And most of the jays that become breeders do so by replacing breeding vacancies, pairing with widows somewhere nearby home. There is about a quarter of the birds that become breeders do so through this process of territorial budding that we'll talk about here. The key to the story that I'm telling today is that there is sort of a third, which is a combo version of replacement, in which the replacing individual actually takes over part of mom and dad's territory. That is the territory that they grew up on over the previous year or two. So we used to call this replacement budding, where they're actually replacing a widow, gaining that territory, but they take along part of mom and dad's territory as an extra prize. So this is partly what intrigued Sarah about getting into this explicitly. This is just a quick description of the 3 forms of territory inheritance. The first one you've heard referred to a few times already today. Basically, it's the classic budding where a territory expands. A helper becomes a breeder with a dispersing individual from elsewhere and inherits a chunk of mom and dad's territory. Inherit the back 40 is what we used to call this. Classic budding. And in our literature that dates back to the 70s, we've always observed that it's basically reserved for males. It tends to be the males that do this budding. Secondly, as I've just referred to, there is this idea that we can gain a territory by pairing with a neighbor, but you get to take along part of the territory you grew up in. That's this partial territory inheritance. And finally, there's a relatively rare situation in which both the male and the female in adjacent territories take off chunks of both of their respective territories and become a sort of a joint budding thing. Pretty rare. But anyway, so those are the 3 forms of partial territory inheritance. We're excluding in this analysis full territory inheritance, which is when mom and dad disappear and one of the helpers, usually a male, inherits the whole territory. That's outside of today's conversation. Main question we want to ask today: Does any females get to have some of this inheritance, or is this all male stuff? And number two, if they do, how does the pattern of inheritance differ between the male and the female pre-breeders as they move into breeding status? We can do this because since the 1970s, we've done extremely detailed territory mapping throughout the entire scrub jay study tract every single year. So we have now into GIS data files, exact polygons for every territory that we've monitored for the last 50 years. Sarah, who's become a remarkable R expert over a relatively short time, then taking the data from these polygons and actually doing a quantitative overlap in adjacent years to study what the pattern of year 2 territory overlap is with year 1's boundaries. So she can actually quantify exactly how much or how little a new breeder inherits from mom and dad, so to speak. And then doing a set of statistics to compare those. So let's see what the story is. During the period that she was able to use these data, 169 cases of pair formation in which some partial inheritance occurred. And again, just emphasizing that we're excluding the direct inheritance, which is, as you can see, mainly by males, but certainly not exclusively to males. Females, in a number of cases, have also directly inherited. Different story. We're looking at this partial version now. And of those 169 instances, as you can see, 3/4 of them occurred by males. Sort of the same story as the budding altogether tends to be male dominated, but is certainly by no means reserved for males. 1/4 of the cases were cases in which the female inherited a chunk of mom and dad's territory. So females can and do inherit some of their natal territory. The question we then asked are these two parallel questions. One of them, how much of mom and dad's territory did they inherit? In these partial inheritance cases, does one sex have an advantage over the other? The answer is no. The two sexes have equal probability of gaining portions of approximately equal size of their natal territory. So there's a nice measure of pure gender equity in the partial territory inheritance story. So this frankly came as a bit of a surprise to us. I don't think it was a surprise to Sarah. I think she suspected it, but
He's more of a feminist.
Us older males. No, I thought let's just talk about lovely. I've been mapping these damn things for the last 50 years. So it's so much fun to see the fruits of this coming into these cool new sociobiological studies. Okay, the second question we wanted to ask was, well, how much of the new territory in these cases is part of the old one? This is quite somewhat different from this. This is how much did they get, roughly equal, but how much of the new territory consists of the portions of the natal territory? The answer is, here's where the real gender difference comes into play. It turns out that males have a significantly higher proportion of their new territory that consists of the natal territory. As you can see, a bunch of them up there close to 100%. Well, guess what? Those are classic buds. So most of this new territory that the males are inheriting was part of mom and dad's one. That's how we invented the term territorial budding in our 1978 paper. So that's an interesting thing. Who are they budding with, I think, is our next question. One thing quickly, Sarah did ask questions about whether there were any social conditions that favored this process. The answer was there weren't any. But there is a big difference in with whom they pair. The males are pairing by and large with dispersers. A lot of them by not dispersers that we believe or know to be novices. A few others pairing with dispersers that we know have some breeding experience, but 3/4 of the, or 2/3 rather, of the males pair with a dispersing jay and form a new pair in their bud, compared with a relatively much smaller proportion of the females. So the females instead tend to pair with the neighbor and hitch along a piece of mom and dad's territory in the process. So the females are much more prone to taking on a neighbor's territory than the males are. Well, guess what? The consequence of this is the males' territories tend to be much smaller than the females after partial territory inheritance. This is important because we do know from a variety of different studies that territory size matters a lot over the long term. And if I had space there, I would have said smaller and more dangerous than the females, because these brand new buds, which tend to be small, yeah, they had part of mom and dad's territory, but they have to be defending a bunch of boundaries in places that they never had before. And so the first year after budding, mainly by males, is spent defending like crazy. And the mortality rate of male first-year breeders is actually higher than the females. So there's some huge advantage to the females in this strategy. You get to pair as safely as possible, popping next door to pair with a widow, take a little of mom and dad's, your natal territory with you, without having to defend wholly new boundaries around most of that area. So there's some pretty cool advantages that females derive from this partial inheritance strategy. In my mind, the significance of this study is very cool. It's the first time we've really seen a quantitative spatial analyses based on our territory maps sequentially through the years. So kudos to Sarah. Sarah, if you're listening, way to go. So it's the first time we've seen really good spatial analyses of the GIS database that we've built over the last 50 years. It certainly quantifies a key advantage for females in delaying breeding and in exercising some phylopatry. Yes, this is a sex biased dispersal species with females tending to go farther, but there's plenty of advantages for females to stay home. Blah, 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 let's see. The social dynamics of this story is complicated. I don't have time to talk about that. And certainly, and this is with hats off to Sarah Barris, it underscores the importance of examining female behaviors just as carefully and in as much detail as we've traditionally examined male behaviors. So I'm as big a feminist as Sarah is. Congratulations to Sarah for launching this study. I'm going to shift now straight to a separate story by another Sarah, PI of another. Oh, yeah, sorry. There's by the way, that's Sarah Barris, now new graduate student in Dai Shizuka's lab in Nebraska, on her way to study fairy wrens, I think, in Australia. This is also, by the way, I think our last picture of Reed with his beloved JLab group, taken last April. We're going to now jump to Jonathan Dickinson State Park. How much time do I have? I'm good. Okay. Yeah, this should go pretty quickly. It's a wonderful story. I'm trying to keep up with Monica Folk's story here, and you can judge how we're doing. This one is not nearly as long yet. So I think everybody here knows Jonathan Dickinson State Park, an incredibly beautiful and large state park on the southeast coast of Florida, hosts a famously declining population of scrub jays. Used to be in the multiple hundreds of birds back in the 80s and on into the 90s. By the 2010s, it was down to a pretty small number, despite the fact that habitat restoration had begun to happen by that time. And so there's a quite real question was being raised of whether this there's something wrong with the situation there, possibly inbreeding for reasons that you'll see in a second. I'd love to following Monica's talk, because Jonathan Dickinson is the southernmost end of this string of preserves along the East Coast from Indian River through St. Lucie County down to Martin County. And importantly, Jonathan Dickinson State Park is now the last stop on the train, on the scrub jay train to the south. There used to be scrub jays, remember, in the scrub ridges that went all the way down into Miami-Dade, Broward counties. Those are all gone now. Something just happened here that I don't know what it is, but as long as this was okay, that's, yeah. That's important, what I just said. It's the southernmost remaining population of scrub jays. Consequently, that park has no access to colonists from anywhere except the north. So keep that in mind as we look at the story that emerges. Did something just happen? Right. Since 2018, when we began this study, we are aware now of 3 different dispersals that have come and either stayed or gone from savannas, and 2 additional ones that appeared this year at Sea Branch Preserve, which was just restored to some degree, habitat restoration last year. But since we've been monitoring the birds at Jonathan Dickinson in 2018, 0 dispersers from anywhere into that population. And I'll just give you a quick sort of jump to the end. We think that the only place that birds can come from right now is the north, from the places that Monica just described in the previous talk. What's happening down here? There's a little filter down here of places that are capturing those dispersers. So consequently, to date at least, nobody's gotten down here, and that may be a sort of a semi-permanent condition for Jonathan Dickinson State Park. There's little scrubs that are being restored north of it, so those represent places where dispersers can settle. Consequently, the state park in the southern end of it is kind of stuck without getting any colonists, or at least darn few. Despite the fact that this place is thousands of acres of really fine habitat, we began this work with the work of my graduate student, Tram Nguyen. One of the particular features she was interested in is looking at the degree of inbreeding in the various in several key populations of scrub jays around the state. And the key point here is that in contrast to all of the other populations, including this little guy, the Savannah State Park, with only 9 or 10 territories max, just north of, or 15 miles north of Jonathan Dickinson. The level of inbreeding at Jonathan Dickinson is the highest, and most disturbingly, the level of inbreeding increased significantly from the first times that we captured some blood from these birds right around the year 1990s to the year 2000, compared to the very recent years in which we bled additional birds and having abandoned them. Inbreeding is rapidly increasing at the Jonathan Dickinson site. So we have sort of direct smoking gun evidence of a situation underway there. This is just another version of the same thing, but I put it up here just because you can see that a few of these individuals are like really inbred. It's like breeding with brothers and sisters. Consequently, we began this process of doing a translocation. I want to particularly single out Carl Miller, who's been a huge help from the Florida Conservation Commission, and a bunch of other individuals led by daughter Sarah. I also want to signal there's a picture of Carl with our former field technician, Natasha, and there's a picture of a scrub jay being released, and it's a little too dark, but you'll see there's still a scrub jay in here next to Carl's pointing. So we've done major demographic follow-up ever since, gotten essentially all the birds banded at that place. And I want to shout out especially to Rob Rasmuth, who's here. Rob, you're a hero. We wish state park biologists around the state would emulate even more your work. Just talked to Rob, the real restoration beginning at Jonathan Dickinson began in around 2005, 6, 7 range. Oh, I encountered this slide. I can't wait to get to one of your fire fests. So they're still going on. October 19th. Yeah. Gonna be big. It's gonna be big. It's gonna yeah. Anyway, so what are the results? How are things looking? You can see right here a quick summary of it. The asterisks show you the 3 years in which we've done translocations. We put several birds in 2019 and 2020. Let them go for a while to see how things were going. This year, we put 2 more second-year birds, non-breeders, into the population. We have numbers that go back into the mid-2000s thanks to J-Watch. Anybody here participate in J-Watch? Thank you all. J-Watch is one cool project. It's like really, really important project for understanding the biology of these birds and monitoring it long-term using citizen input. That was a total numbers of jays. The nice feature that we've documented as recently as this year is the number of territories, actual paired pairs and territorial groups continues to rise. It got to 40 this year. The population is as high as it's been for basically recent memory, right? Since the 1990s. A quick summary. This is unofficial because I've tried to translate F1s and F2s and F3s. This could be wrong in detail, but you can get the basic point. These are the actual translocations. 8 birds in 19 and 20, 2 more this year. 6 of those 10 are still alive. All of the living birds are now paired. And if we look at F1s, best I could tell from the records, that's the number of F1s that have been produced. The 4 older ones are all paired already out there along with these. And we just formed a new one here. And we're beginning to have some F2s produced from these guys up there. So overall picture is of the, whatever that number was, 120 birds in the population, we've gotten to be a decent little fraction of birds that are either directly actually birds from Ocala, or they're F1s and F2s from those things. So we're beginning to build a population that is getting some genetic influence from a completely different population, which if I did more time, I would have pointed out, has the very lowest level of inbreeding of any population in Florida. So it's wonderful news. As you might expect, the offspring of the hybrid pairs that we have right now are the lowest level of inbreeding individuals in our Jonathan Dickinson population. So they better be, or we would have had made a mistake, right? Last point, the case has continued to be that the Jonathan Dickinson fledgling production has been lower than that we know well from Archbold on average. That's a pretty significant difference between the 2 populations. But interestingly, this past year, 2024, I wonder if there's a cause and effect. We don't know, but it's interesting that the fledgling production per pair at Jonathan Dickinson this year was essentially exactly the same as it was at Archbold. So there's a significant amount of promise to this. There's a map of the 40 territories as of this year, up and down that ridge that's just west of US 1. And there's what we could have looked forward to. And just notice that where they were proposing to put these were not only on top of the densest population of scrub jays that now, but also, importantly in my mind, they were gonna usurp that one other ridge that to date is unoccupied by Florida scrub jays. But Rob, that'd be a cool place to start seeing some of these birds popping over to, if not being new translocations. There's the story. Thank you.
Can we do a couple of questions? If anyone is interested? Yes, no?
No?
All right,
Okay.
great. Thank you so much. Oh, yeah, great. Just repeat his question.
Since Dickinson State Park is at the south end of the long territorial strip, coastal territory, is it possible that the whole food ecosystem may be different than it is at Ocala or on the Lake Erie?
Question is whether the food ecosystem of the Jonathan Dickinson scrubs might be appreciably different from the ecosystems of other scrubs around the state. Short answer, no. I think I'm just being facetious there, but every one of these scrubs that is in a unique, climatic quadrant, no doubt has some different things. There are actually some botanical differences between the Jonathan Dickinson scrub and some of the other coastal scrubs farther north. It is the highest rainfall of any of the scrubs, probably in Florida, being down there in the southeast corner. So no doubt there's some specific little differences, but in terms of what the scrub jays need for food and shelter and nesting, basically, it's very similar. I think that's a short, quick answer.
Well, thank you so much.